Hey ladies and gentlemen, Adrian here for Digital Dojos, and today we're going to be taking an unboxing and first look at the Analogue Pocket Transparent Edition. So if you do not know what the Analogue Pocket is, this is a multi-system handheld or portable game system for all intents and purposes that allows you to play games from your Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, Neo Geo, and all sorts of different handhelds in a much more unique way because of its FPGA chip, meaning you can play with actual cartridges and play your old game library physically on this device. No, as they call it, emulation because of the FPGA chip. Analogue as a company is known for a lot of their hardware that allows you to play and experience a lot of retro games from Nintendo devices to Sega devices and so on in a more modern form factor and function with more, again, modern technology like these FPGA chips to experience it in this, digital age with the hardware and games that you own. Now, that's not to say that with something like the Analogue Pocket, you can't do emulation, but a lot of these devices are geared towards being able to replay and revitalize a lot of your old library and those retro games on more modern hardware. Pocket is no exception, with a ode to a lot of the famous handheld devices and the ability to support and have compatibility for a lot of those games on the singular device. So with that, let's go ahead and first jump into the unboxing. There's the back. You can see transparent red is what we ultimately ended up with. Originally, we were shooting for the transparent purple or grape to kind of match my OG Game Boy colors, but settled ultimately for the red after the purple pretty much instantly sold out here. So, cutting it open, let's get right into the plastic here. There we have it. Let's get the focus going. Transparent red. There was something about that transparent, almost fantastic, very 90s vibe of electronics that is making a comeback. Vibrant red. Go with the pull tab, and out it comes. And yeah, it's pretty decent weight to it. Sizable. This is my first Analogue Pocket model in general, and feels good in hand. Plastic feels good, hefty. Have the back there, and of course the D-pad, standard buttons, your shoulder buttons here. Let's see if it has a charge. Holding down the power button, looks like we have a status LED light, and there we have it. It's booting up. Welcome to Pocket. And since this is the first time here, you can see it's asking you if you want to follow the short tutorial for an introduction to Analogue Pocket. And we're going to go ahead and actually let's go through the tutorial since this is indeed the first time. Press the button to continue. Oh, I literally just have to hit the continue button. It's telling me what to do. Press for start. So that's the third button right here. And then so select. So start, analog menu, and then select. Volume rockers. Hold it together for mute. Hold analog and press that for brightness. So if I hold this and do that, that will adjust the brightness apparently. Hold it left and right to cycle. So this is the original play modes. Left and right. Then sleep, wake, power button on the side. Hold it for 2 seconds for fully powering on and off. And then all the fun stuff. The user license agreement, which we're all going to read very quickly. But here we have it. In the main menu here, play cartridge, library, memory, tools, settings. And let's go ahead and do the very famous screen peel there. So we have access to the full screen, and you can see it all in all its glory. So yeah, now comes with the configurations. You can go into the system settings, adjust things like the system, GB, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and then Pocket settings, so the display brightness settings here, audio. Again, you can use those hotkeys like I mentioned earlier to adjust certain settings. Otherwise, you can go in here and adjust it to max brightness. So here we have it at max brightness, and here we have it all the way at the lowest brightness setting, which is 5. Next to it, we have a Game Boy Color I have right here, and I have one of the games I had in my childhood, Home Alone 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take that cartridge out, slot it here in the back to the cartridge slot, and that's what that looks like there. And then you can just kind of see side by side size comparison pocket compared to the traditional Game Boy Color. And let's go ahead and hit play cartridge. And there you have it. So right now this is the color mode that we're working with, but I believe if you hold this, you can adjust this as the original Game Boy with the light, pinball neon matrix. This is the DMG. This is the analog Game Boy. And you can just change those color modes on the fly. Oh, and GG's. But not bad. I mean, obviously super seamless. You're literally just plugging the cartridge in. Screen looks phenomenal. Obviously, just for comparison's sake, the Game Boy Color, and I think you can see the difference in this is an unmodded stock Game Boy Color in just the screen brightness alone. So get to relive some of the classic games in a form factor that's very similar to and true to the original one, with just all the nice kind of enhancements there and quality of life improvements, as well as obviously the support for the micro SD card slot, which allows you to do much more and play just beyond the traditional cartridges if you so choose. Now, in talking about the Analog Pocket, specifically the transparent model, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the controversy, not just from the technical perspective, but more so specifically about just getting your hands on a device like this. The Analog Pocket is notoriously known for being sold out and more commonly found on like the aftermarket, on the eBays, especially after recent drops like this one, where a lot of scalpers will get their hands on it and then continuously resell devices like these. And there's a mixture of obviously that being a bad thing that happens in a lot of popular console releases and so on and so forth, in combination with business practices that Analogue as a whole is known for when it comes to release windows and backstock and fulfilling backlogs and whatnot. So again, I want to definitely get that out of the way. This is my first experience with this handheld. It's the first Analog Pocket I've ever owned. It's actually the first analog device I've ever owned, despite wanting to add more of those to my gaming collection. As a video game enthusiast and collector, I'll admit I'm happy to finally have one of these in my collection, and having been able to get it at retail and finally just have Analog's devices in my collection. Again, known for a lot of their design aspects and just their modern approach to retro games and revitalizing life to a lot of your retro platforms. But again, I can understand as a consumer the frustration around some of the loops and whatnot you have to go through to potentially get your hands on one of these, and the repeated behavior when it comes to a lot of the launches with these limited edition, whether it's the transparent or the glow-in-the-dark models, or even just the traditional black and white model. So in terms of form and function in its design, as you saw from the unboxing, again, this is that transparent colorway. It comes in black, white. Just recently, prior to the announcement of these transparent colorways, they had the announcement of the glow-in-the-dark green model. And then with this, you have a very traditional button layout that you would be used to on something like a Game Boy or handheld. You have shoulder buttons here on the back, so your left and right shoulder buttons or triggers there. And then you have your standard game slot. The thing about Analogue is you can get all sorts of adapters and whatnot, which we'll take a look at in a minute on their website. And then at the bottom here, you have ports for transferring from your traditional console. So if you had I say console, but handheld, but if you wanted to transfer, for example, from your old Game Boy Colors, it shares that same port there. Almost looks like a is that a FireWire port? Almost looks like it, but or old variation of USB. But beneath that, you do have USB-C, which is the standard charging port, and will also allow you to use it with the dock that Analogue also sells, a la like a Nintendo Switch sort of setup. You have your status LED indicators, and then you have what is a 3.5 millimeter jack, even though it almost looks like it could be like a reset buttonhole. That is your 3.5 headphone jack if you want to plug those in. Again, your standard buttons here. You have these two here, which are like your almost like your standard A and B button, with these two right here that are more concaved on the top or on the left and top side. And then you have this D-pad, which is slightly concaved in the middle here. Button-wise, feels solid. Nothing too crazy, nothing too mushy or too stiff, I'd say. Shoulder buttons are all right. Nothing, again, spectacular or crazy there. And then you have your three buttons at the bottom for your analog menu select, and your volume rocker, sleep, wake button, and power on the side here. With these buttons, you can hold them in a combination of ways to trigger certain events and whatnot. And yeah, that is the physical makeup overall of the device. Now, with this, obviously, you can use it to play a lot of your classic games. Like I mentioned earlier, you can go on their website and get all sorts of adapters that they sell and accessories to play things like Neo Geo, Neo Geo Pocket, and Atari Lynx, all these sort of converters for this backend. By default, it'll support a lot of like the Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, and so on, but you will need those adapters for other systems. They pitch this as more than just a gaming device. It can do things like it has a built-in synthesizer, and you can do like music and create loops off of this. I'm sure there's some cool videos of people doing it with this device, but I imagine that's not why a majority of people are buying this. And then you have further kind of expansion or accessories with things like the Analog Pocket dock. So much like a Nintendo Switch, you can dock this, hook it up to a TV, and get 1080p output, and hook up a controller and play with a wireless controller or via Bluetooth, so that you can have that kind of couch-like gaming experience with the handheld device, which is obviously something that you can't do with a lot of this older hardware without modding it, and so on and so forth. So again, a lot of the appeal behind this is that multi-game support. A lot of the appeal behind this is the form factor and this kind of FPGA chip, where it's not necessarily emulation and you get to play the real cartridges that you own. That being said, with recent developments and updates, obviously there are possibilities and avenues in which you can install cores and whatnot, and via the micro SD card slot, you can essentially get emulation working on this hardware. So there's that, and that's something I'll definitely be exploring in the future, just to test out. But initially, in all my tests of playing some video games here, a lot of my childhood Game Boy cartridges and whatnot that I have here in front of me, everything pretty much ran without a hitch here, and everything worked fine from my standard, some of my old Game Boy games to some random like these all-in-one junk that they give you for some of these things that claim to have like 125 games, but they're all like junk stuff. Yeah, everything ran fine and didn't have any issues, and everything, again, booted up easily and worked. So in that sense, getting to play your actual library that you own, that you have in a more modern form factor, it's great for that. This retails for about, I believe, $250 if you can get it at face value and market price. Again, that is one of the big controversies around something like this, is having to get it after the fact, or especially with limited editions like these or special editions like these. The price tends to vary in the aftermarket and so on and so forth, which is unfortunate. But in my initial experience, it's exactly what I anticipated. It's exactly what I wanted. Again, I'll have a full review after I've tested this and really put it through its paces and tested out some of the software functions and features and the kind of limits that you can push this. But out of the box experience, I'm happy with what we have here. I'm happy how the transparent red kind of turns out and looks. I wish I could have got the transparent purple to match the traditional Game Boy color that I grew up with, but we'll settle for the transparent red. Form factor wise, definitely bigger than I expected, and just still feels good in the hand. It's that kind of perfect medium between like a standard Game Boy color, as you can see here, and more traditional handhelds, obviously like a Steam Deck or these third-party Android devices. So good happy medium. Again, and it's all with that FPGA chip inside powering it. So this is the Analogue Pocket Transparent Red. If you have questions, comments, things that you want to see about this, please drop them down in the comments below, because I'll be putting this through its paces, and be sure to have a full review up in the future to come. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.